you take that debt and you pay it off because it's worthless. Let me tell you, first thing is we agree on anti-money. We agree on anti-debt. So I'm a kind of those things guy that prefers gold.
Ray Dalio says gold is his top choice, and there's a reason for it. He believes the safest way to protect your money is by keeping 10 to 15% of your portfolio in gold. It's not just tradition, it's smart strategy. Want to know why the world's top investors still trust gold? Watch till the end. This might change the way you see wealth.
People think they get richer if the price of their houses and the price of things that they're owning, in a sense, go up. But it's the same house. It's the same stuff, right? When it goes up in price because of inflation, I mean, buying power is what matters, not price.
What can a dollar buy you today?
If the debt is denominated in the currency that the central bank can print, you always get the printing.
Yes.
And you always get the devaluation of money. And then what happens is then the debt becomes so cheap that it's easy to pay it off. So if you're watching, like Japan is a good example. If you owned a Japanese bond, you would have lost about 80% of your money relative to something stable like, let's say, gold, and you would have lost about 60% of your money relative to a US bond because you got 3% less interest rates and the currency depreciated by almost 4% a year, and that 7% a year is what you would lose. And then what happens is if you're in Argentina, take it to the extreme, you take that debt and you pay it off because it's worthless. Let me tell you what I think about it, because I'll speak for myself, and I think these things are accurate. First thing is we agree on anti-money. We agree on anti-debt. Okay, that's important.
When you say anti-money, define anti-money, please.
That there are two purposes of money, and that is as a storehold of wealth and a medium of exchange. Medium of exchange, it'll exist. Storehold of wealth. You store it in a bond. Okay? Money and debt are the same thing, because when you're holding money, you're holding it in a debt instrument. Anything you're going to put your money, your dollars, you're going to be in debt instrument. Otherwise, you lose 5% a year or something. And so money and debt are the same, because debt is a promise to get the money. So they're the same. We have a supply-demand problem with this money and debt. Okay, so I don't want to own money and debt. And so we're aligned. Anybody who's going to want to say it as a storehold of wealth is because the quantity of it cannot be increased other than through the mining activity, but without that restrictions. Okay, and that's that. So the first thing I want to emphasize is, are you there? Is that part of your there? And then how much should be in your portfolio of that thing or those things? So I'm a kind of those things guy that prefers gold for the reasons I'm going to explain. Okay, but I have some Bitcoin, but I've got much more gold, and the amount that I think is a prudent amount, if you look at correlations and the systems and all sorts of things, the least risk amount to have in terms of maintaining your buying power is somewhere between 10 and 15% of a portfolio. So I think they
10
should
to 15% should be Bitcoin or gold?
Anti-money.
Anti-money. And you're putting the two together in that bucket.
Okay, yeah. Now, on the Bitcoin versus gold, here's the thing. Bitcoin is not a private asset. The governments watch it. They know what you're going to have. They know where you are. They can tax it. They can take money away from it. It exists at their pleasure. and they can do anything they want with you. Their comfort of you being in Bitcoin is better than their comfort of you being in gold, let's say. Like I was saying, I was with these central bankers who said the reason that when negative interest rates, how much could it? If they had a digital currency, there was no floor on the negative interest rates because they could tax you. Mm-hmm. Okay? So, okay, you don't have the privacy, you can get taxed and so on. Whereas the saying of gold is, it's the only asset that you can have that's not somebody else's liability, meaning you have it in your possession, and that's somewhat different. The second thing is central banks holding it as reserves. Watching the periods of conflict and so on, they go to gold, even in terms of their enemies. Because what governments do in periods of conflict or whatever is they print money, they make bonds, and that's not good. And they don't want to hold each other's bonds. Nobody wants to hold the bonds. And that's why they hold gold. They don't trust each other. And that wouldn't work that way for Bitcoin because governments can control it.
We do inflate gold every year. What percentage is mined every year?
A pittance.
Okay.
I don't know, like 1% or so of the stock of gold.
Yes.
And consumption for jewelry and that's it. Anyway, and it has been for thousands of years in all different places. So, and another thing is, I can understand price changes in gold. Mm-hmm. In other words, if prices change, if this changes and that changes, I can make sense of why the gold price changed that way. I have a problem doing that with Bitcoin. It still very much moves in a way that it wouldn't be necessary. It's a supply-demand speculative market that's tougher for me to nail down. So when I go down that list of things, I say I favor gold for those reasons. If something came along that told me why. I also, some people have said, and I'm not sure if this is right, it's been quite amazing, but that with quantum computing and so on, there's a good chance that you can break it.
Yeah, well,
I don't know if that's true. I'm not an expert. I'm just throwing another thing in there. We need to go to some island paradise. Like it was so funny. I was in Bali in this paradise, and then I fly up to China. And, in Bali, there was this spot off the grid, fine. And they have this food plot. I'm like, I didn't even know how much land produces how much food. And I didn't realize that you can have a plot of land that's not very big, and you could live wonderfully, and everybody's in peace, and they're going to their meditation, and they're doing this, and they're enjoying life. And I get up, and I go fly to Beijing, and I go, and I'm with leaders in Beijing, and then I go to there, and they're fighting for control of the world.
And I want to talk about what your 2025 predictions might look like. So,
we are at war with China, and it is It hasn't turned to a military war, but it's actually turned to very much a subversive war in which each would overthrow the government and do all sorts of stuff. And it's not going to go back. It's going to be that way. the two countries fight wars differently. A leader in China, one of the top leaders in China, was describing the Chinese way of fighting war and the Western way, which he calls the Mediterranean way of fighting war. The Mediterranean way is that you go in and you fight to win, and you kill each other, and you do that. The Chinese way of fighting is so that your opponent doesn't even know they're fighting. You win if you're not smart enough to win the war without actually fighting. You must not be very smart. So it's a war of deception. It's a war of anyway. So there are these different wars going on, the different mentalities, and so that's where we are. I think, and then there's this desire to have these separate parallel universes in technology. I don't believe that you're going to be able to maintain control of intellectual property that is something that is publicly used. I mean, maybe if you go inside your spot and you have sandboxing and whatever it is, and you never bring it out and you never look at it, then maybe you can intellectually protect it. And that's sort of how the atomic bomb was built, and maybe you can do some of that. And by the way, both countries are trying to secretively build the weapon that the other one can't fight against, because if they show the way you really win is you build the weapon that the other one can't fight against secretively, you show it to them, they find out that they can't win, and then you win without fighting.
And that's why Ray Dalio sticks with gold. If the biggest investors are doing it, maybe it's time we pay attention too. Hit that like button, subscribe for more real insights, and let us know. Do you trust gold with your future?